The shot is quickly done. Let's go as well.
In today's episode of The Honest Athlete, Lauren and I will be looking at a topic that's quite relevant to not just swimming, but a lot of other sports. Early specialization. So how do you know your event is going to be your event? Or how do you know this sport is going to be your sport? Taking part in certain sports from a young age, you can see quite a big dropout rate from young teens going into early adults. You get burnout. There's lots and lots of different parts for early specialization, some of it good, some of it not good. And I think it's a topic that rarely gets discussed. And it's not just for athletes, it can be for parents, it can be support networks. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to being able to discuss this topic with Lauren today, and we shall see where it's going to take us.
Yeah, and who knows where it's going to go? It's The Honest Athletes,
Who
right?
knows? Very much so. I was going to say, first question actually I do have for you, Lauren, is how did you know that you were going to be a swimmer? Like, at what point did you decide this is going to be the sport for me?
Well, I've said often on this podcast that my mum didn't want me and my brother to swim, so she would throw us in every other sport. And I think because when you're a child and your parents kind of don't want you to do something, you want to do it more. But to be honest, I used to go and watch my mum swim because she still swims to this day. And she would do 3-4 sessions a week at my home club, Saracens. And I would go and walk up and down poolside with the coach and just watch my mum swim. And I just wanted to be her. And so I think I've always just loved it, loved being in the water. You'll hear lots of swimmers say, I'm sure you said it kind of feels like home. It's where you're comfortable. It's what you know. And I just fell in love with the sport and how hard it was, how much training there was. I just loved it. I didn't really like school that much. I didn't really have many friends at school, if I'm honest. Most of my friends were the teachers, but I wasn't bothered because my friends at swimming I loved them and I could relate to them and we were very like-minded. So I think as I went through each stage, I just loved it even more and even more. And so when I remember when I was in year 6, and my brother started to do Saturday mornings. I wasn't doing any mornings yet. And my mum said, you're not doing mornings yet. You don't need to. And I remember crying to my mum saying, please let me do mornings. I mean, who does that? But, and I just think probably from then I was like, no, this is definitely, I love it. And this is what I want to do. And yeah, just my love for it kept growing. But what about you? When did you know?
I think I was kind of like almost not a little experiment, but my dad was the one who taught me to swim, and it was purely from a safety point of view. And I had other activities, like, I did brownies, I played the piano, tried to play netball, did a bit of horse riding, running, like loads and loads of different activities. Gymnastics as well. Didn't last very long because I could never master the backward roll, which I find very ironic.
That's a killer.
It is going backwards, but my back to breaststroke turn is the back flip. So I can do it, but not on land. And I figured that I was a lot better coordinated in water. And part of my personality type was that I enjoyed being different. There's a very thin line between being different and being awkward. So I think I treaded that quite well. And I just love the fact that not many of my classmates were swimmers or were involved in swimming. And I love the fact that I could beat the boys when I was younger. And I just loved as well that connection that I had with my dad, who was very heavily involved in swimming. Even though he was a volunteer coach, his main job was a helicopter pilot. So I think from there, I just felt more at home, a bit like you just have that connection with that sport and you just know this is for me. It wasn't always smooth sailing. I remember going through lessons and just point blank refusing at one point to move from the middle part of the pool to the deep end because the deep end just seemed terrifying.
It is terrifying.
But it is. It's such a big jump. You can't touch the floor and it's just,
you don't know what's down there.
No, it can be alligators, crocodiles, who knows?
I still don't know.
Still don't know. Hairballs maybe, but
yeah.
But I think, and I love the competitive side of it. I think from a young age, I was very, very competitive. And then I had 2 younger brothers as well. So there was always that sort of sibling rivalry. I was very protective of them as well. But I felt there was that sense of community. And I think, swimming is one of those sports where it's social, but not, you can't, apart from doing social kick, where you're kicking on a kickboard, you can chat away. It's the only time you can be above water and talk. Most of the time you're under the water, and being able to talk is very, very tricky. So you're normally catching up in the showers or on poolside before you're getting in the pool. That's where you try and get as much of your conversation out before and after. But I quite like sometimes living in my own head as well. I was a very imaginative kid. I had vivid sort of like stories. I was quite creative. And for me, I think swimming just allowed me to live in my little world a little bit longer. But I guess, yeah, I think I just felt more at home with it. I could trip over on a flat floor. I've got incredibly floppy feet, which is great for swimming. Terrible for running. Could kick my own ankles. I've got bruises and stuff because I used to try and do cross training to get that balance of, some form of proprioception work and muscle development. But yeah, everything was just designed, I think, for being a swimmer, other than being tall. I was quite small and petite, but as I say, hyperextendable joints, everything just kind of fitted with being a swimmer. If I was to choose a sport, if I couldn't pick swimming, I'd love to have been a dancer. So uncool, but I used to do Highland dancing as well.
Wow.
So Scottish. But I got to the point where we have what's called the sword dance, where you've got two swords crossed in a cross on the floor, and it's like a dance that you kind of go around it. And I used to think that once you reach that stage, they'd used real sharp swords. And if you didn't get it right, your feet would get chopped off. So I quit because I was terrified of having my feet. I was like, I like my feet too much. I need it for swimming. But didn't realize that actually you start off with wooden swords. So as I say, my imagination, I live in my head too much, and I just believed what my initial thought was on that. So I kind of wish I would have loved to have stayed on with dancing a little bit. But I think it's so important as a youngster to be open to lots of different sports, because you don't know where you're going to fit. For me, I think you have that innate ability, but also support. I do think your support network, is really, really key for you. Your mum, being that inspiration for you, I think is really important. And for me, I guess it was my dad. I know from a Scottish athlete point of view, you've got Liz McColgan and Ailish McColgan, mother and daughter, really incredible track athletes and runners. So sometimes there is something to be said about the family dynamics and the role models that you have from your parents' point of view. But I guess I've got another question for you, Lauren, is because you took swimming to quite an elite level, if you weren't able to take swimming to an elite level, do you think you would have stayed in the sport?
That's such a good question. That's a big question. And there's a lot of stuff going through my mind, but I like to think I would, because I was never truly in it for, obviously you want to be successful, but I don't think I was in it I never approached racing, and I'm sure I've talked about this on the podcast before. I got told by a coach, okay, so here's the story. I got told by a coach who I absolutely loved, respected. They were amazing. They really cared about me as a person. And so whatever they said, I was like, I really thought about. And this coach sat me down once and he said, Lauren, you're too nice. And I was like, what? At first I was a bit offended, because I was not offended because that's a lovely thing to say, but I was like, what's he talking about? And he meant in terms of racing. And I was like, what's he? And it's something that I've thought about loads, because I got told this a few years ago. And he said, I used to watch you at like British Champs, or I watched you at the Commonwealth Games or things like that. And you never went down to the race, and you never looked like you were like, I'm not going to say the words that he said, but I'm going to beat everyone in this race here. You can imagine what he said, but I'm going to beat everyone here. And after the race, you were never like, oh God, really annoyed that you didn't win or something like that. And he was kind of talking about having that bit of an edge in swimming or in sport that meant that you were like, no, I'm going to rip everyone apart here. And the more I've thought about it, the more I've been like, yeah, I don't have that. And so when you asked me that question, I think I would have, because I just loved it. I just loved being there. I loved being around the people. I did enjoy racing, but I loved training more. And for me, it was always the training that I actually preferred. So I think I would have, because it wasn't racing that motivated me necessarily or made me tick. It was more just working hard, being around people that wanted to do the same, and having a structure and all those kinds of things. So I like to think I would, because again, when I retired, I had a swimmer come up to me and say, you are one of the only swimmers that if I beat you or if you beat me, you are exactly the same with me. Because I think a lot of swimmers go to the swim down pit, and if they get beat by someone, they can be funny. Whereas they said to me, God, I'm going to miss you because you were always the same. I knew whether I beat you or you beat me, you would just be you. And say, well done either way, and all that kind of stuff. So I don't think that ever motivated me too much. Of course, I wanted to do well. Don't get me wrong. I'm not sat here saying I never wanted to win. I wasn't bothered. Of course I was. But for me, it was just having the privilege to be in an atmosphere, be able to train, be able to do all those things. So I like to think that I would. But again, you don't know. A lot is driven by racing, and making teams gives you that bit of confidence, a bit of a boost to carry on, a bit of motivation. How about yourself?
Yeah, it's kind of a big question that I actually have to sit and think about it. I don't know. I'd like to think so, because same as you, I love being in the water. I love the competitive side of it, but I did like the training because I kind of drew that competitive side into training. And I kind of had something similar as yourself. I was told at one point that I was too soft, that I wasn't tough enough or hard enough. And I was like too nice to everybody around me.
Yeah.
And I even had one girl once, we used to have these little time cards, and, you go and hand to the official behind your block. Like, I don't think you have those anymore. So I was like, showing my age just now. You had your little card, and it would have your PB on it. And I remember one girl looking over, and she grabbed it, and she was like, that's a slow time. And I was like, oh, that like really hurt. But instead of feeling really sad about it, I kind of thought, okay, right, I'm going to try and see if I can go faster than that time and try and beat her. And she ended up beating me. And, I still thought, right, be a nice sports person and shake her hand and stuff. And it was, those moments there, I was like, oh, I don't know what to do in that situation. I could have quite easily turned around, and I'm not good in conflicts. I do know that. So, but what I lack in verbal conflicts, I feel like I channel that into my swimming. But I do recall being told at one point that I was definitely a little bit too soft. So yeah, I'd like to think I'd stay in swimming, and it's one of the questions that I wanted to ask, because I find there is a bit of a dropout rate once you hit the teenage years, because there's lots of things happening. You've got growth and development. Some athletes have early puberty, and they're really, really tall. They hit that sort of early development so quick, and then they hit a plateau. And is it lack of enjoyment? Is it there's too much pressure behind it? Is it confidence? For girls as well, you've got your menstrual cycle kind of coming into that as well. And I think there is a lot of push from possibly parents, possibly the support network, to make teams to progress. And if you're not seen to be progressing, it's like, well, what's the point in being part of a sport? Sport is who's going to come first, who's going to come second. It's all about winning and trying to be the best you can be. But there's a lot more to sport that I've kind of noted in the years that I've been on this planet. And I've learned that how do we keep more younger athletes involved in sport? Is it that dream and desire to be that elite athlete? There's no set pathway. We have like a rough idea, if you're hitting this target, 12, 13, that's really good. And 14, 15, and, Michael Phelps was doing this at 15, this person's beating that time, therefore they're going to be the next Michael Phelps. We're always comparing. And I think when I was younger, I had that a little bit with my dad being involved in swimming, but I think that general enjoyment, knowing that we didn't have fancy facilities, we kind of had the Rocky effect, enjoyed working hard. And again, it kind of fitted my personality type of just being that little bit left wing of being the odd one out. All these people had loads of easy hours, access to swimming pools. And sometimes we had a pool that temperature every now and then would go up to like 33 degrees because the thermostat broke. I would run to training, or I always strive to be just that little bit different. Whether taking it to elite sport, if I kept going, I've still not really fully answered that question. I don't know. I'd like to think I would, but yeah, I've not
You
really
like to think
that.
you would, but you know, there is that motivation of if you're making teams and stuff like that, it's like, oh, it's showing, and I you know, I have not an excuse. It's not an excuse, but I have a reason to carry on with this sport.
Yeah.
The reality is, actually, I remember being on a swimming camp when I was really young, and I'm not sure if the coach should have said this, but maybe he should. It was a reality check, really, of like, everybody in this room has said their long-term goal is to go to the Olympics, but the reality is maybe not even one of you will actually go. It's a much bigger percentage of swimmers that won't make that. And so, you know, it's kind of like, let's be realistic in, okay, that's your goal and that's amazing. But actually, if you don't do that, we still want you to be involved in this sport and you know, carry on competing and racing and loving it. And I wanted to ask you, and I think everybody experiences this in swimming, but when you're younger and you go to nationals and stuff like that, I mean, nationals I used to get so nervous for, because it was like, when you're younger, it's like, oh my gosh, it's like the biggest thing ever. And if you win or you medal or whatever, it's like, oh my God, it's like the Olympics, but it's just even better. And the funny thing is, I get parents or even younger swimmers coming up to me saying, you know, this person's winning at nationals and they're miles ahead of everyone. And, you know, how do I get my son or daughter there? Or how do I get myself to be beating them? It seems impossible. And it's amazing to win and stuff when you're younger. It really is. But actually, those swimmers that were winning at nationals when you were younger, for me, personally, they weren't even still around when we got older trying to make the senior teams, you know, whether that was burnout or it was too much pressure or those kinds of things. Was it the same for you when you were younger at nationals? You've got these people that are like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to reach that. And then when you get older, they're not even on the scene anymore.
Yeah, very much so. And my main event changed as well. Like, I was very much a 200 fly swimmer. And then the 400 medley kind of like chipped in. So, you know, I qualified for my first nationals, I think it was British age group championship. So Bagcats, British age group categories. So Bagcats. And it was a 200 fly that we came down for. And there was a couple of girls from like Liverpool and Guildford, and you know, it was all quite intimidating seeing these girls compete against them that I'd never seen before. And they were all winning loads of medals. And, you know, once I got to 15, 16, a majority of them had stopped. And then once I reached 18, 19, pretty much all of them were no longer continuing with swimming. And whether that, again, was down to career choice, they decided to, you know, focus more on school, or they just stopped loving it, or, you know, sometimes, as you say, if they win all the time when they're younger and then they hit that plateau stage and then they're not winning, sometimes that lack of motivation, you know, they feel their self-worth drops because they're not getting the medals, and they base their self-value on those wins. And it's really important, I think, for those kids at that age to, you know, value, yes, winning the medals is amazing. And, you know, I was striving to win medals because that's what you do. That's kind of what you're there for. But the life lessons that you learn and being able to stick with it, even when things are not going well, even when you're coming fourth, you're coming ninth, just missing finals, is not always that case. And sometimes it is those that stick with it. You learn a lot about yourself, your mentality as well as an athlete, and also your physical maturity too, because there's so much untapped potential for some of these athletes. You get late developers as well. And it's those that I think stick at it and stay consistent and persistent through it that are the ones that do break through and can stay on. But yeah, there's so many different variations of it. And it's interesting now, like I feel there's certainly a lot more pressure nowadays. You've got social media, so the expectation to do well, because if you do well, your name can trend, you can go, you know, you can gain more followers, you get more likes, and you know, that hits that dopamine, serotonin. You're going to want that buzz and you're going to feed off it. So then you want it more. And then when you don't get it, you're not going to get the likes. You're not going to get the followers. People, you know, you get trolls that can say some awful stuff. And it's a minefield out there. And I do think that there needs to be more support or more help out there for not just the young athletes, but also for the parents. Like, how do you manage that? How do you prepare and protect and help your young child coming through in sport to be a healthy individual, not just physically, because sport brings you so many physical health, but I think the mental well-being as well is so important. And you do need that extra bit of grit in you, I think, to make that transition from doing a sport that you love and taking it to the elite level. There is, and I don't quite know how to describe it, there's just that extra little bit, like you're willing to go the extra mile. You're willing that you're waking up and it's a cold December morning at 4:30 in the morning and you could quite easily curl up and go back to bed, but no, you're going to stick with it because this training session is going to benefit. And even if it's rubbish training, you still come back the next day. It's those that stick with the plan with the long-term aim. And even if you don't end up with that end goal that you desired, you've still got so many opportunities. And I think it's those that are willing to see that there's opportunities out there. But it's so tough. And that's one of the reasons why I was so keen to maybe talk about this today, because I think both our perspectives, our journeys have been very different, but I think looking to the future as well, like where do we see it going in sport?
Yeah, definitely. I've got a couple of questions from what you've just said, really. The first one is about your experience with social media and stuff like that, because it has developed a lot through your career. So when you were younger, it definitely wasn't what it is now. I mean, it's progressed so much in such a short space of time. Even in my career, it was like, British swimming on Twitter, what? And then like now it's like, you can't, they're all over it. They're on the tweeting all the time. And I wanted to ask about, first of all, what it was like when everyone thought you were Miley Cyrus.
Oh God!
Because I absolutely love that. And second of all, is a bit more serious, but did you ever experience trolling, and what was that like?
Yeah, so going through school, no smartphones. It was the Nokia 3210, the indestructible phone, and
mine still doesn't need to be charged yet.
It's incredible. Screen doesn't crack, and you can play Snake for years. So that was it. It was all about playing Snake, picking the ringtone, picking even the skin or the cover that would pop off your phone and put back on. And you thought you were really cool and hip if you had a different color front cover to your back cover and stuff. Yeah, I was mixing.
I never got to that level. My cover was all just Tigger, like bright orange Tigger. So I never was cool enough to have one thing and a different one on the back. So I apologise for that, Anna.
No, don't apologize. I was going to say that's me attempting to be cool, like trying to it in, and it did not work whatsoever. And I remember my friend, I think she got a 3310, or I don't know what the numbers were, but she was like the next model up, and it was like Snake 2, and you just sit and be like, oh, this is amazing. And then going to like the post office to get your £10 top-up voucher, and that was you for the month. Trying to not, text too many times. And I was
going to say, don't text full words either. You.
No, you're like pressing the
button. Yeah.
Yep, you are. And then it was like, right, how do I get to C? Right, 1, 2, 3. Right, C. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was not great for someone who's probably a bit dyslexic with spelling as well. Great for the letters, but then when it came to writing, it was not good. But social media didn't really come into effect for me, I think, until maybe when I was like 16, and it was Facebook, and it was literally just poking people and throwing sheep at them. Obviously on Facebook, not in real life. Yeah.
That's harassment now.
I know. But, yeah, and it was mainly used for keeping up, just keeping in touch with friends. And I was starting to, travel a little bit with Team Scotland, and going to like Mare Nostrums and doing some international competitions and camps. And I was making friends as I went. And I was like, it's a great way for keeping in touch with them. And, throw a sheep to a friend that's over in Australia or over in Ghana.
Yeah.
Little things like that kept me amused, and you could share photos, and, very, very naive and very, just excited about people contacting you. Didn't really hit until Beijing. And all of a sudden, Twitter, was starting up, and Facebook. We didn't really get that much access because Beijing, you don't get access much to social media content out there. But coming back from it, it was interesting because a lot of people were quite fascinated by my name. Didn't really hit home and think until 2012, because there was another girl called Regina George, I think I can't remember what from, but she was in athletics, and they're like, oh, Hannah Miley, Regina George. It was like the Disney mashup. You got Hannah Montana, Miley Cyrus, and Regina George from Mean Girl. I buzz from it, and my name started trending at one point, and it was all these people commenting and messaging, being like, oh my God, I thought, there was going to be a Miley Cyrus comeback or Hannah Montana remake. No, it's a little Scottish swimmer. And it was really bizarre. It was very, very bizarre, but very cool at the same time, but slightly annoying because I had the name first. I am older than Miley Cyrus, so I'd like to say.
There you go.
But yeah, it was definitely a new world, and it was slightly frightening because you can look back at some of the stuff that you tweeted or stuff that you posted, and you just think, oh, not that it was bad, but you just think, I thought I was so cool typing that or writing it, or being really, edgy. And, you kind of see your own sort of personal development socially as well, whilst you're putting different posts up. But I remember sitting in Beijing and, celebrating, Cassie Patton had won an Olympic medal, Kerry-Ann Payne, Becky Adlington, Joe Jackson. And, we were just enjoying the moment with the girls, winning their medals. And they were looking at comments. And for some of the girls as well, it was really, really heartbreaking to see that they were picking up on the comments of people just commenting on how they looked. And, one of them really got upset and just said, why wasn't what I did good enough? Why are they commenting on how I look? Why are they commenting on me? And it was really, really hard to see. And for me, that's when I realized actually how dangerous social media stuff can be. So I made a promise to myself that before major competitions that I wouldn't look at any of the social media apps beforehand. So when smartphones started becoming a thing, I actively delete the apps, didn't delete my accounts. I gave my account details to my management company, and they would kind of look after it or just, leave it as it is. But I wouldn't re-upload and look at stuff until once I finished swimming, because I knew how I take things to heart very, very easily. I wear my heart on my sleeve. I'm quite literal as well. So if somebody says something about me, I will take it very personally. And I knew that. So I had to protect myself as much as I could, because you can have 100 comments saying really nice, positive things. And all it takes is for one person to just say something that's not nice. And you just stick it. You just hold on to that. And it's really, really damaging. And I didn't want that. I wanted to protect myself, as I said, going into it. I've really kind of enjoyed it. And it is difficult as well when you have a look at, you start then comparing yourself. And I think it was possibly about my mid-20s that I then started trying to use social media a bit more to sort of help engage, I guess, with the people that were interested in myself as an athlete, but also just to try and figure out where I fitted in again. But I started becoming very, very self-conscious because, you kind of you don't view yourself as a photogenic person. I can take some really funny photos without even trying. I'm quite an animated person and I move an awful lot. I mean, if anybody's watching the YouTube videos on this, I move quite frequently. I don't sit still. So the cameras just love capturing some really interesting poses of me, at competitions and stuff. And I'm not too fussed by it, but I suddenly started feeling very, very self-conscious because it was like pictures that I would put up, they wouldn't get as many likes as, say, somebody else. And, oh my God, they look really, really stunning. And I wouldn't ever try and aim to, do my hair, do my makeup, because I just don't feel confident enough with it. So yeah, it was really, really hard. And the amount of times I get tagged on Twitter for people making music videos, and I feel so bad because they're like, I've just made this new song, and they've tagged Selena Gomez, Justin Bieber, the Jonas Brothers, and then they've tagged me as well.
Please tell me you comment on it.
Well, no, I've left it, but what I started doing is on Facebook, there's this trend that goes around that says comment the artist and see if they'll reply back, and they always end up tagging me. So I kind of reply back saying thanks. I don't sing, but I'm and I kind of realize that, oh, it's the wrong one. But yeah, it is. It's so bizarre, and it's hilarious at the same time, because if you Googled Hannah Miley, and also I think at one point Miley Cyrus was starting to go out with a guy called Patrick, and my dad Patrick. So if you typed in Hannah Miley Patrick, it came up with loads of pictures of Miley Cyrus dating this guy.
That is so funny. I didn't even know that.
It was, yeah, it's quite interesting, and I find it, I find it quite funny and quite endearing. But the worst I've seen personally for trolling was, I think, 2016. And that was where I kind of tried to protect my brothers from it as well. Because once I didn't look at my messages until, tags and stuff until after I'd finished racing. So I think racing was still going on. And I started looking at it, and, there was so much support. Coming fourth by 1500ths of a second was heartbreaking, but at the same time, it's one of the best performances I've ever done at a games. And, I was still in two mindsets as to how I felt by it. But the amount of people that were just like, oh, well, you're just not good enough. That's crap. And I remember my brothers jumping on the bandwagon, trying to like defend me and like reply back saying, oh, well, you're just an idiot. Or, and basically the troll was just trying to, encourage people to reply back. You get people nowadays that literally just say some really nasty things just for a reaction.
Yeah.
So I had to try my brothers to be like, don't reply back. I really appreciate wanting to respond and defend me. But I was like, this person, I mean, I'm assuming it's a he, I don't mean to stereotype, but I'm assuming this individual is literally just doing that just for the shock value and to get people to reply, because
to get a reaction.
Yeah, and I don't agree with it. And, everyone's entitled to their opinion, but I kind of feel, it doesn't take much to be kind about it. And plus, words have no emotion behind it when you read it on a screen. So it can be taken in so many different ways, in so many different contexts. And, you can read things, and if you're in the wrong mindset, you can read something and it can seem like an attack, when actually, if you read it when you're maybe not so defensive, it can read fine. So it's such a minefield, and it's now become more and more. And it's all about, as I say, the likes, the shares, trying to get your following up. And, it seems to be the less clothing that you wear seems to get you more followers. And it's a real minefield. And you kind of start basing your need for acceptance and self-worth based on the numbers. And I just take myself away from numbers from swimming, because I wanted to enjoy the actual essence of it and the element of it. So a lot of the posts, Phil, if I ever feel like I'm struggling with stuff, just put a post of Poppy up. Yeah. I use my dog kind of like my go-to, but it's such a minefield. And I do find it hilarious with that sort of mixed kind of tag with Miley Cyrus. That's probably going to stay with.
Every time I see it, I'm like, please, this is amazing. You need to do your own series.
I know, but the funny thing is that when I get married, my last name will become Duff. So you've got the Hannah Montana, Miley Cyrus, and possibly Hilary Duff now.
Oh my Lord, this is amazing. It just gets better and better every single time. You've just sparked like a thing that I've noticed, and it's not difficult to talk about, but it upsets me sometimes, because with this shift in social media, I see the athletes of today, not just swimmers, I see athletes, and, their social media accounts and profiles are more important than ever right now. There's a massive importance of, having a personality rather than just being the swimmer and no one really knows who you are and stuff like that. And like you say, there's a lot of pressure on social media for athletes to provide content and be exciting and share their story and all those kinds of things. But I've seen a massive shift over the last couple of years and I don't want to pigeonhole, but it's mainly females, and it looks a lot about image. So, and it worries me, and I was wondering what you thought, but it worries me that these these female athletes are focusing more now on looking great and getting those numbers than their actual performance. Now, don't get me wrong, they're amazing athletes. You know, I'm not saying they're not, and I'm not saying they're not focusing on the sport. They absolutely are. I know that for a fact. But it looks like there's just this massive pressure to look fantastic all the time, if that makes sense.
No, it does, because I think a lot of people think that if you can look a certain way, have that model look, you know, you're going to get sponsors, and sponsors can bring financial gain. It can bring you freebies. So, you know, it opens up a lot more doors. But as you say, it becomes a big distraction, because that becomes the focus, and actually the training drops off. So your performance might not be good. Social media has been a great platform for athletes to showcase a brand, like their brand and their name, which, you know, for future jobs and careers, you know, it could be beneficial. It allows them to earn money, in a sense, out with what their potential I don't know why my thumb's going up on my Zoom, for some adds a thumbs up every now and then.
It's because it's like, you're doing a good job. This is great.
And I do agree with you. It is scary to see that, because it becomes, that's all consuming. And it's, you know, as you say, can you make this go viral? You know, the fact that if you ask people, to ask kids nowadays, what do you want to be when you grow up? Like, social media influencer and a YouTuber tends to be up there. And it's like, they're young kids, and it's frightening. And, you know, there are so many great potentials and opportunities if done right, but it is for girls especially, such a minefield and almost a dark hole to fall into, because if you're looking at girls who are ripped, who have got great, you know, 6-pack abs, this, that, and the other, you know, you'll have girls trying to starve themselves, trying to look skinny, feel thin. And if they do that, you know, that's going to upset their rhythm for their menstrual cycle, which then impacts their health, their development. You know, and then again, it's going to affect their performance. Their mood's going to be affected as well. Skin breakouts, like, there's so much stuff to it. And it's, you know, you try and fit your aesthetic to fit somebody else's. And it goes back to what I said before about comparing. You just start comparing yourself, and it really impacts and sort of really harms your self-worth a little bit as well, because you feel that who you are as an individual isn't good enough. And again, media can pick up on it. They're like, oh, such and such has lost weight, or such and such, oh my goodness, they've ballooned, they've gained weight. And it's like, you can't do one without getting commented on without another. It's just, it really, really is quite damaging. And especially young kids, and going back to like that early specialization, I feel a lot of kids will feel like, I have to establish myself as this type of athlete or this type of person, because I need to start building my social media. I need to start, you know, getting my following up. I need, you know, and again, it can either come from the athlete, or sometimes it can come from parents as well. I've seen a couple of profiles where the kids don't run it, the parents run it. But I don't know if that's a way for them to feel, you know, get my kids sponsored, free suits, because suits, you know, swimsuits are not cheap. No. They are expensive.
Is it Scotland that passed the rule where under a certain age you can't? I think that's amazing.
Yeah, Scotland
so
and Ireland. Ireland was the first one to pass that. It's an age restriction for technical suits. Technical suits being a suit that adds compression. And I think Scotland formally starts, I think, 1st of September this year. So anybody who's 13 and under are not allowed to wear a technical suit. And a technical suit is classed as something that creates like hydrodynamics, so compression, so anything that restricts or compresses the muscle. Also the stitching, ultrasound bonding, so it needs to be stitched rather than ultrasound. And also the rubber seal that you have at the bottom of the leg part of the suit can't be on it as well, because that's all part and parcel of the performance side of a technical suit. So it's basically like a training costume, or you can get knee suits as well for girls and boys for training. So it's those types of suits. So trying to kind of figure that out as well. And that, in a sense, I think will help again, because, you know, you're looking at the likes of Adam Peaty, Sarah Sjostrom, Katinka Hosu, Freya Anderson, like all these athletes who do showcase branded suits. And again, it's, you know, plastered across social media. These kids are going to be influenced by that. They'll want the new things. So there's good things about social media, but I do think there needs to be more education around it. And I do think it needs to be utilized in a way that's going to help and look after the well-being of the athlete, because, as I say, it can be a very dark spiral and a dark hole that you can fall down in if if done incorrectly, and it's trying to protect the young athletes as well. As I say, you can't control who goes out there in comments. You can get people that will put a picture up and then cyberbullying. You can get people that will just say, "Oh, you look ugly," and that can really hurt. And the person that sent it will have no idea because they're hidden behind a screen. They won't see that person's reaction, and it takes away that emotional impact. And that's where I think we do need to kind of look at a strategy, whether it's you're joining a swimming club, let's do a social media educational session on, things to watch out for, things that you can do to help maximize what you can do with it that can be good and positive, but also be mindful of what you put out there as well. Because especially young developing teens, your emotions and hormones are all over the shop. And sometimes you don't realize actually how sharp your tongue can be. I kind of call it your silver tongue with sometimes what you're saying if you're happen to be caught in a bad mood as well. But yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, what are your thoughts on it as well? Like from what you've seen, do you see a difference between when you started getting involved in like Instagram and Facebook and stuff compared to the new athletes starting up on that now?
Yeah, massively. I think it's so different. And one of the things, like you just touched on suits and stuff like that. And I think that rule is brilliant. I really think could make a big difference because I think the price of things is also not only is petrol, really rocketing, but so is a training suit, a pair of goggles, a pair of goggles is like, I think now you can get some that they're really expensive for like 50 quid or something like that. 50 notes, as my nan would say. And so, my goggles, I will go and do like a swim skills thing or something with a young group of swimmers, and they look at my goggles. I don't know if you've seen them, but they go, "Oh my gosh, how much were your goggles?" And I go, "Oh, guess." And they're like £60. And I'm like, "Oh my God, this is insane." And I'm like, it was like £5 because I made them. It's 2 plastic things like Swedish goggles, a bit of string, and I buy bungee cords in bulk separate that I just tie on and it's done. But I think, the pressure for the kids nowadays, I was speaking to an athlete the other day and they were telling me about a pair of goggles, and I'm not sure what the brand is, but they basically fit your face. And I don't know too much about it, so I'm not going to comment too much. But what?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I don't know. I've never seen them. I've never held a pair. I've never spoken to someone who's developed them. But I think there's a lot of pressure on parents and on younger athletes to go, well, I need those because everyone else is getting them. I need that training suit because all the girls have got it. And if I don't have it, then I'll be the odd one out. Or same for boys. Equipment, everything. And I think I was going to ask, do you think that's a part of maybe why young athletes don't carry on with the sport because they feel embarrassed or they can't post that picture on social media that they're in that training suit, or the girls or the boys, they laugh at them because they can't afford a certain pair of goggles? I don't know. I don't know, but prices seem to be rocketing and people just can't afford to do that, especially families with more kids. It was me and my brother, so everything was double. What do you think about that? Have you noticed that at all?
Yeah, hugely. And I do think that is possibly an impact for that dropout rate. It might not be because the child doesn't enjoy the sport. It might be because the family can't afford it anymore, especially if they're trying to keep up with the latest trends, with the latest suits, the latest goggles, kit, gear. And that's why I think these policies are so important, because it's the sustainability for families remaining in that retention scheme. I kind of like that term, retention scheme, because it's, yes, you've got that pathway to the elite, but not everybody's going to hit that elite stage. So how do we retain these athletes to stay involved in sport for their both physical and mental well-being? As I say, you do need that parental support and that support network around it, but it does come with that financial cost. And if you've got young athletes who won't really get the benefit of these technical suits and some of these technical equipment, because couple of weeks or a couple of months down the line, their body shapes change. They've gotten bigger, they've gotten taller, they've gotten muscular, their limbs have gotten longer, they're going to be out of proportion. And I think it's once you start heading towards that elite side of racing where you're making maybe national times or wanting to final at nationals, or, you know, you're wanting to make teams, that these bits of equipment, or even when you hit that plateau stage as well. Because if you're used to all the fancy equipment to start with, once you hit that plateau stage, it's not about the kit, it's about you as the individual and that athlete. And I think it's so important for athletes to learn that it's not the suit that you wear, it's the person within the suits that's important. And, you know, speaking to your coach, dealing and managing with good performances and bad performances as well. And I think that gets lost because it's, oh, well, it was the suit. You then start blaming other things rather than actually taking that internal look of being like, right, how do I improve? How do I better myself? And it's taking that ownership and responsibility. And as I say, if you lose that motivation because you're not performing, you lose that confidence because you're not in the same suit as everybody else. You know, they're all getting the brand new suits and you're in a hand-me-down, or you're in a suit that you've had to wear for the last like 2-3 years and it feels a little bit big. You know, there's all sorts of things like that that can really impact. And I think it is so vital that we do help athletes learn that, you know, the equipment's there to help. That's not the main reason for you to be performing. It's the athlete that wears it. That's the most important thing. Yeah, it is. And it is crazy to say lots of things are creeping up and getting more expensive. And I think it's picking the moment that, you know, you value those things more when you do get the opportunity. I'm not saying you can't wear them. You know, when you will wear them at some point, but I think it's having that value of them, because there's nothing worse. I used to really cringe when you see swimmers in the showering in shampoo, body wash, or whatever it is, and they've still got their technical suit on. Oh my goodness, I cringe because like the shampoo and the shower gel, like the chemical reaction, it eats away at the technical suit. So the life expectancy of that suit just diminishes as soon as you shower in those suits. Yeah. So it's like, you know, aftercare and the proper looking after it is so key. So that's why, you know, the likes of Irish swimming and Scottish swimming have kind of brought this new policy in. Hopefully we can kind of start educating some of the athletes and the parents as well, so that when you buy these suits, they last as long and you're not just going to get 2 wears out of them. You can actually get, you know, 5, 6 and hopefully maybe 10. Wait and see. But yeah, it is such a key part. And you know, I've seen swimmers just quit because they're like, oh, well, I'm obviously not good enough. You know, they've worn all the suits, they've worn all the fancy hats, the goggles, and they've had maybe 2 or 3 months where they've not PB'd, or they've had a year where they've not PB'd. I mean, fun fact, when I retired 1st of December 2021 was last year.
Well done, Hannah. You with it?
The last time I PB'd for my 400 IM was 2009. That's my fastest time for the 400 IM. And a lot of people are like, oh, because it does come a point where it is about the time, but as well, it's about the race itself and the ability to keep progressing. But the progression gets harder and harder. And it's those athletes, as I say, the ones that hang on when it's not progressing and stick at it. And that plateau can last a year. The plateau can last 4 or 5 years. But it's the ability to look at certain things as well. So if you've specialized in fly or breaststroke when you're younger and you hit that plateau, you know, it's an opportunity to try different strokes or, you know, different sports or something, you know, find out what your, you know, you don't just kind of lock yourself in that one thing. For me, the medley was great because I had 4 strokes to work on. So I was always kept entertained and quite motivated because I could work at each 4, which always gave me different outcomes in my medley. But I do think, you know, with all that's kind of moving and progressing on in sport, that we need to remain in touch with the main essence of the sport, which is the person behind the trainer, is the person behind the swimsuit, the person behind the bike. You know, it is that individual, and it starts from like the youth group coming through, you know, the grassroots.
Well, yeah, before we had this conversation, you said to me, what defines success? And it's so true. Mm-hmm. And it kind of touches on that camp that I did early on in my career, which was, you know, the realisticness of what we're talking about here is, actually maybe none of you will go to the Olympics. And so, don't just have that as that is the only way that I have made it or I've been successful within the sport. There are so many ways for you to define success within sport, not just swimming, in sport. And it isn't all down to results. It's great to have the results. It's fantastic. But actually, what I got out of swimming, the best things I got out of swimming, weren't necessarily the results. It was the friends I made. It was the experiences. It was traveling to Arena League and the bus breaking down on the way back and us just sitting in a pub for hours like, okay, well, what do we do now? And it's those memories, going on a training camp, lucky enough to do that. Counties, everyone's sitting on poolside from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and just figuring out, how do we keep ourselves entertained here whilst we're waiting to race? It's those kind of things, time management, training hard, understanding how to get yourself out of a negative mindset going into a session and still making the most of it. There is so much to sport other than just, I won at nationals. I won at, regionals. I won at Olympics. That's great. And, in some ways it gives you a voice to be able to maybe reach some more people or to have a profile, and be known a bit more. But actually, no, you get so much more out of it. And so it is. Sorry,
I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go for it.
It's, one of, talking about, as you say, having to entertain yourself, because the amount of athletes, again, going back to the social media, that will have their phone on poolside. And my old swimming club, before I left once I left in 2016, they actually have a policy where they've got a big container that all the swimmers put their phones in, and it gets sealed, brilliant. And then get their phones back at the end of the competition. And if the parents need to get in touch with the athlete, they get in touch with the coach.
Okay.
But the athletes are encouraged to bring books, they're encouraged to bring games, they're encouraged to bring other little bits to keep themselves entertained. That's not their phone. And if they, them moan, well, they don't moan, but I've heard athletes say, oh, well, my music's on there. And it's like, you can pretty much buy these cheap little iPods, shuffles and stuff on eBay or little MP3 players that you can use. And again, if they get wet, it's fine. It's not going to cost an arm and a leg if you get your phone wet. But it's that motivation when you're on poolside and actually dealing with being bored. And all part and parcel of being an athlete is that adaptability as well, because it's not going to be smooth sailing. And I think as well, coming back again to the technical suits, we want it to be easy. You just add this suit, you're going to be faster. Well, actually, how do you deal with a suit ripping? How do you deal with a bus breaking down? All part and parcel of that sort of development journey is it not going to plan and actually coping and managing with when things don't go well. How do you deal with it? Do you panic? Do you sit and stress out about it? Or do you sit and chat with your friends? Do you make up games? Do you find ways of it's completely out of your control? So there's no point stressing over it if you can't control it. So, there's so many different things that sport can teach you. And as you say, the success side of it, yes, you get the small few that can take sport into their career with the sport, and it carries them on for a very successful future career. And, everyone wants that, which is great, but not everyone can have that. So I think, as you say, it's being realistic with that idea of, yes, you can aim for it, but be prepared that if it doesn't go that way, where is it going to go? There's a lot of things that sport can teach you. And I think those life lessons are so key, because sport isn't forever. Like when I decided to stick with swimming, my mindset was, well, I can study at university when I'm 99, but I can't necessarily compete at a Commonwealth Games when I'm 99. Little did I know you had master swimming. So,
oh, here we go.
But again, my mindset was, if I wanted to take it to the elite level, this opportunity is now, and it's not going to last forever. Tried to make it last forever, but I kind of knew there is a time limit to it. So once you don't have that, where is that next stage? And, the previous chat we had about that transition is, you've put everything into that one bit. Now what? Where does it go? And social media can help, because it can give you a couple of platforms and ideas as to where you're going to go if you're really good. Like there was a girl that I follow, Lauren Jumps, and she started skipping in lockdown. April 2020. And from there, she just kept practicing lots of little bits and actually watching her profile grow and develop. Now she's got like, hundreds and thousands of followers from skipping. And she'd never picked up, well, she's picked up a skipping rope before, but she just picked it up to try it and learn. And she kind of got technical development, and it's really, really cool to see. And she's grown this huge platform now based around skipping. So there are opportunities there that you can get from sport and from certain aspects that you do within sport, and it opens up a lot more opportunities for you. But I think, we do need to look back and help guide and offer some sort of, I don't want to say structure, because life is not structured. Being adaptable is really, really important. But, being open-minded, there's so much you can take away from sport. And yes, the medals are great, but I don't sit and walk around the house with all my medals being like, look what I won.
Don't you? Wow.
But no, you win the medal. You've got your determination behind it, your consistency in training, your persistency, listening to your coach. There's lots of things that aligned at that moment in time for it to be right, to win that medal. But even if you don't win that medal, you still have those things. Yes. And it's as long as you stay with yourself that actually that is just as rewarding. Might not seem it as a time, especially as a teenager, because you want to physically come away with something. Yes. I knew that. I loved it. I love being able to collect. I mean, that's probably one of the reasons as well why I tried to swim as many events as I could, because I just couldn't stay in one event. But it is important to value yourself as an individual, not just the medals that you have, because you take yourself around. You're the person that you meet people. You're the person that sits in exams. You're the person that goes to job interviews, this, that, and the other. It's not the medal. Yeah.
As much as you want to send it off to do your driving test and all that, it's just not going to happen. I completely agree. And I think, it's almost easy when you're making teams and winning and everything like that. It's actually when you don't, how do you respond? Yes. And that's where, coaches and the sports team and your parents and everyone around you needs to make sure and do as much as they can that it's an enjoyable thing for the athlete, and like you say, value things other than just solely the outcome of, did you medal? The first thing when he used to say to people in school, what do you do? I'm a swimmer. Oh, have you gone to the Olympics? Yeah. And it's like, no, I'm 14, but I have done the regionals, and they're like, oh, okay, great, and it's like within yourself going, no, I love it, and I'm doing the best I can. It's that kind of stuff, really.
I guess as well, like certain athletes with that early specialization, they have their whole life planned and set up, and when things don't go according to plan, whether it's plateau, whether it's not making teams, losing funding, also, there's things as well that's taken out of your hands, like injury. You can get certain injuries that rule you out of the sport completely. And, being adaptable and knowing that, sport can stay with you for life. Obviously, it depends on injuries and stuff. Certain are more severe than others, but, sport can be so beneficial. It's not just limited to that one thing. And I think, it's easy when you're younger to think, oh, I am a breaststroker or I am a backstroker, and sticking with that. You can't predict the future. And I think it is so important to allow yourself that opportunity to try different things and try things that you aren't good at, because I think it's very easy for us to work at what we are good at, but I think it takes that extra something to try things that you're not good at. So for me, I could swim breaststroke faster backwards than I could forwards until I was my whole race strategy in the IM was to just nail it for the fly in the back, get as far in front as I could, because everyone caught me up on the breaststroke. Yeah. And then it changed when I was 19. And, I kind of almost resided to the fact that I was never going to be a breaststroker. I'm still not. I still don't know what I do with it. But it clicked. But it took a long time for patience. And I think, had I completely ruled out the fact that I was never going to be a breaststroker, my medley wouldn't have improved the way that it did after the age of 19. So never rule things out and think, oh, that's it. As I say, it's just being open and being adaptable to it.
Thank you for listening to the episode. We hope you took some things away from it. I know that we enjoyed this conversation. We weren't sure where it was going to go, to be honest, but I'm proud of us for that one. But no, we thank you for listening, and we will see you next week for another episode.